Section 6.5, congruent polygons. That is probably our one vocab word out of this particular section. So go ahead and write down that word, congruent polygons. Make sure that you define it in your notes. I want you to have that definition along with all those other ones that you've been putting in there up to this point. So make sure that one gets in here. So here's what we're talking about. We're talking about a congruent polygon. The idea is that we have a congruent polygon if the corresponding sides are congruent. Remember, congruent means, geometry's version of equal. It's equal in length or equal in angle, depending on what we're talking about. So for this congruent polygon, they have to have corresponding sides that are congruent and corresponding angles that are congruent. So let's take a look at our example. We have triangle ABC and triangle, what do we got? A, B, C, D, F, G, and H here. And so as we look at these two triangles, what we notice is that for angle A, it's got one line. Angle F has one line. Therefore, those are considered congruent. Angle B, 2. Angle G, 2. Those are congruent. And angle C has 3. Angle H has 3. Those would be considered congruent. So we have congruent angles. I kind of did the second part of it here. If we look at sides, we've got that side is congruent with that one. We've got this one here, congruent with that one, and of course our third one congruent over here. So we have the true statement here. We have corresponding sides that are congruent. We had corresponding angles that were congruent. Therefore, here's what we know. We know that angle A is congruent with angle F, angle B congruent with angle G, angle C with angle H. We know that our lengths of our sides, BC is congruent with GH, AC, is congruent with FH, and AB is congruent with FG. So therefore, we have a congruent polygon. Now, of course, this one was really nice. They put it right there, and everything was, kind of all matched up equally. But let's take a look at this next one. It's not quite as nice. You can tell just by looking at it that it's not going to match up exactly the same way. Here's what they tell us. They say that this is triangle CBD, and that is congruent to triangle PQR. So when we write it in a particular order, then we know that they match up in the same way. So what they're saying is that C matches up with P because they're both the first one listed, and B matches up with Q, and then of course D matches up with R. So it is very important how you write these triangles when you're putting them here. You need to put them in such an order that the sides, or the angles rather, correspond with the other congruent angle that it goes with. So they have to match up in that same particular order. And so what they're saying here, if we look at this triangle, let's take a look at this again. Let's kind of just clear that and start it over. So if we're looking at this again, what we're saying is C and P are the same, C and P, and yeah, they are, okay? We're also saying that B and Q, okay, so these two are, and yep, they are. He's got 2. And we're saying that D and R, and sure enough, D and R both have 3 tick marks. So those are all congruent. And of course, our sides, would match up in the same way. So CB would be the same as PQ, and so on. So we can get all of our sides to match up in such a same way. And so by looking at this, we're telling us this is a congruence statement. They're saying that these two triangles are congruent, and from that we know that the angles are congruent, we know that the sides are congruent. So we get all that information out of that one statement there. All right, now let's take a look and see if we can figure out, are these congruent polygons? So we've got these two different polygons here. You know, we've got these two guys right over here, and we want to know, well, are they congruent? And in order for them to be congruent, we got to get all the angles to be congruent. So let's take a look. We know that, here's one mark, so we know that angle X is going to be congruent with angle M. We know that angle Y, which has 2 marks, is going to be congruent with angle N, because it has 2 marks. So you got to find them, you know, you got to look and see. And we know that angle Z is going to be congruent with angle L. So my angles are all good, so that's a good start. We know that the angles have to be the same, and we also know that the sides have to be the same. So let's take a look. Between X and Y, we have a 4 centimeter side. Between L and M, we have a 4 centimeter side. Between Y and Z, we have a 9 centimeter side. Between N and L, 9 centimeters. And our third one is 6 and 6. And so therefore all the lengths, all the sides are congruent also. So therefore, yes, this is a congruent polygon. And now we can write it, and we need to write it in such a way that these guys match up. So I got to write it so that X and M are the same, and Y and N are the same, and Z and L are the same. So I would write that as my triangle X, Y, Z is congruent, and I got to do it in the same order. So I got to go M and L to triangle M and L. Okay? All right, this is your turn. You determine whether A and B are congruent. And if they are congruent, write a congruence statement. So take a look at that. All right, so if you come back and we look at this and we find out that, yeah, this first one is because, you know, look, Q, let's give me a writing utensil here. Q and B are both 40 degrees, so that's good. And P and C are both 50, and we've got 2 right angles, R and D. And then the sides, of course, it shows us our sides match up, 1 there, 2 there, so on. So we can see that. So yes, that is a true statement. And so now we need to make sure that we write it in such a way that we have written it as a congruent statement. So we've got to make sure that when we say it, that we say Q and B in the same place, P and C in the same place, and so on. And so as we write this out, we would say triangle P, Q, R. Okay, P here would have to correspond with C, so that's going to be around space there. Congruent with triangle C, and then Q has to match up with B, so B, and then D. Okay, so C, B, D. Now notice that, you know, I mean, if you were to normally write this, you would think BCD, but that doesn't match up. Don't write it as triangle BCD. That would not give us a congruent statement because those sides would not match up together. So it should be PQR CBD. You always have to write it so that the angles match up together. On the other one, I think it's pretty easy to look right away and say, oh, they're all 90 degrees. So we know the angles are the same. We just got to look for sides. Well, here's 8 foot, here's 7 foot. They're not, so this one is not congruent. So you would just say no on that particular problem there. All right, let's take a look at this example. We're going to find the missing measures here. We know certain things about these congruent triangles, and so from that, we can now figure out what's missing. So let's take a look. We know that triangle AFH is congruent with triangle QRN. And we want to find the measure of angle Q. Now remember how they write that when they write that little M in front. We're talking about the measure. We want a number when we do that. So we're looking for the measure of angle Q. Well, we know that Q matches up with A. So we look for A. Well, there's A. Angle A is 40 degrees. So we know that this angle here has to be 40 degrees also. So we know that the measure of angle Q is going to equal 40 degrees. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward when we look at it like that. All right, let's take a look at this next part. It says find NR. Well, okay, so NR, what corresponds with NR? Well, that's going to be from F to H is going to correspond with NR. And since this is a congruent triangle, we know that those sides are going to be congruent. Since FH is 9 inches, we know automatically that NR is going to be 9 inches. So we know that segment NR is equal to 9 inches. All right, your turn. Try these problems right here. See if you can figure out the measure of angle X, the length of Y's X, and the measure of angle Y. All right, so let's take a look. Now, once again, even though this is a quadrilateral, they're going to write it in order, same way. So quadrilateral A, B, C, D matches up with or is congruent to quadrilateral W, X, Y, and Z. And so if we want to find angles, okay, so we want to find X right here. That's our second one, so that's got to match up with B. So we're going to look for B. What do we find? Well, we find it's 145. So we know the measure of angle X is going to be 145 degrees. That's pretty easy. YX. Let's take a look at YX. We want to find this side right here, YX. So from here to here, you want to find. So that'd be the same as going from C to B. All right, so C to B looks like that's 4 meters. So this is going to be 4 meters. And our last one, we want to find, let's erase some of this here so we got some more room here. Measure of angle Y. Well, what is angle Y? Angle Y, be this one here, matches up with C. We don't know angle Y. Well, we don't know angle C. I mean, we don't know what that is. But because we know this is a quadrilateral, and we know that quadrilaterals always have 360 degrees, we could figure that out by saying that that's going to be angle A plus angle B plus angle C and angle D. We could add all those together. So let's put that in. So we got 70 degrees plus 145 degrees plus C. Well, that's the one we want to figure out because once we find C, we know Y, and D, which is 90 degrees. And so when we calculate all that out, we come out with, I believe that equals 305, the numbers that we have here. So we would get 360 equals 305 plus C. And if we subtract 305 from both sides, we will find out that C equals 55 degrees. And if C equals 55 degrees, then so does Y. So measure of angle Y, 55 degrees in there. All right, so there you go. There you have it. That's the end of this. Once again, extra examples if you need them. Also, don't forget, if you go on and you look for, come here, get rid of that. Just trying to point out something here to you, that you can always go and take this quiz to see how you're doing, see if you know what's going on. They're just little quizzes online that you can use, help you out, see if you know what you're doing. Take advantage of those things if you need them, okay? Don't say, hey, I don't understand, when you've got these other things available that you can use. Take a look at those first, and then, of course, use your other resources that you have.